Hello. How's everyone doing? Hi, everyone. I am excited to be here to talk to you all today. My name is Chrissy. I am a registered dietitian, USAT level 1 triathlon coach, certified personal trainer, kind of a jack of all trades here within the fitness field. Hey, Julie, how's it going? So yeah, I'm excited to be here to answer any of your nutrition questions. I'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, whether it's about just everyday nutrition to support training, or whether you have specific questions about fueling or GI upset or the latest on caffeine or beet juice or any of those things. So, hi, Amy. It's good to see you here. Um, yeah, I have been doing triathlon myself for about the last 10 years or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. So I have the kind of personal passion there in addition to the professional passion. As far as nutrition goes for triathletes, there's kind of two tiers to it, right? So you have the everyday eating to support your training. So that's really the biggest piece of it. I think a lot of times athletes get caught up in like the race specific stuff. And I love talking about race specific stuff. I love race fueling chat. But that's really kind of the secondary tier, right? So like the foundation is going to be all of the things that you eat on a daily basis that are going to help support your training and your recovery and all of that. Kind of the race specific stuff is like the next level to that. So I'll just start chatting about some of, I guess, my tips when it comes to the general, everyday diet and race fueling. But please, I'd love to answer your questions. So definitely, ask away because this is what I'm here for today. So when it comes to kind of the everyday fueling, my best tips are going to sound super generic and you've probably heard them all before, but generally you want to make sure that you're eating, a well-balanced diet, good mix of carbs, protein, and fat in there. So for most athletes, I say most because obviously there's like a subset of low carb fat adapted athletes, and I can definitely talk about that if you guys are interested in that. But for most athletes, they're going to perform best on a diet that has a blend of carbs and protein and fat. So that's going to look like generally somewhere between 45 to 65% of your calories coming from carbohydrates, and then another somewhere between 15 and 30% coming from protein, and then the rest of it being made up of fat there. And the specific breakdown really varies based athlete to athlete and kind of your particular medical needs or your particular preferences when it comes to what you like to eat, but that's typically around the breakdown that people will perform best with. So I see a question here. I definitely want to answer that. There are a lot of supplement powders out there, amino acids, greens? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, so there are a lot of supplements out there. I think there are some supplements that are potentially worth trying out to see how they work for your body. I think there's a lot of supplements out there that are not proven to work. And at that point, it's kind of a personal decision, right? So if there's something that's not proven to work, but maybe you take it and you feel better, whether that's a true effect or a placebo effect, that's certainly your prerogative. As far as supplements that I think have some value for potentially testing out, a beet juice shot. So you can do regular beet juice too. The volume's just really high that you would have to drink. But the little concentrated beet juice shots, those I think are really valuable for endurance athletes because of the dietary nitrates in them. So essentially, those dietary nitrates, once you take them in, eventually they're converted to nitric oxide, which can help with blood flow and oxygen transport in your body. So there is some evidence that those little beet juice shots can help with endurance performance. It's a small boost. Not every single study shows that, but it's typically in the range of about 2 to 4% improvement. So if you are like a weekend warrior recreational person like me, probably not going to make a big difference as far as timing, but if you're really competitive, it may be something worth trying. So that's one of the things that I think is worthwhile. There's protein powders out there. If you feel like you're not getting enough protein in your diet, I think a protein powder can be a good adjunct to a healthy diet. I think most people probably meet their protein needs depending on how balanced their diet is as far as the protein sources they're eating. But certainly, if you feel like you're struggling to get enough protein, a protein powder can be a good adjunct to a healthy diet. It also makes recovery drinks or meals easy sometimes. So I know sometimes people come in from like a long training session, they don't maybe feel like eating a meal after. And so being able to do like a smoothie where you're kind of throwing a bunch of fruit and maybe some protein powder in there, that can be helpful just for convenience sake. So beet juice, protein powders, greens powders, I don't personally think there's research to show the benefits on them. Again, I think if you personally feel better taking them, then there's probably no harm in taking them. But I don't know that there's established benefits. Amino acid powders, so like a branched chain amino acid supplement, there is some research showing that that may be beneficial for athletes. The research tends to veer a little bit more towards resistance training, though, and not endurance training. But it's certainly something that you could try if you felt like you wanted to test that out. But as far as endurance goes, beet juice is really the specific one that I always think of. And then like caffeine in the form of coffee is one that is also a ergogenic aid that people often overlook. So there's definitely a lot of evidence out there that taking in caffeine before an event for most people can help with performance. So that can come in the form of coffee, or it can come in the form of like there's all kinds of caffeinated bars and all that stuff out there now. Yeah, I hope that helps answer the question about supplements. And if there's other supplements that I haven't mentioned that you're curious about, definitely drop them in the comments. There's a lot of stuff on the market these days, so those are just the things that I saw posted here and that came to the top of my head. But if there's anything else that pops up that you're curious about, definitely let me know. Yeah, so those are just a couple of the things that may be helpful to include. I mean, a good multivitamin, if you feel like your diet's not balanced enough, a good multivitamin is something that might be worthwhile. But I do think, unfortunately, there is a lot on the market that is targeted to athletes that's not always necessary for athletes to take. And I hate to see people spend money maybe unnecessarily on things that they don't need. So, yeah, what else? I'm excited. I love answering these questions. Um, if you guys have more, definitely drop them in the comments. I'll just keep chatting a little bit about kind of the everyday side of things as far as keeping a balanced diet. I know one of the questions that comes up a lot of times with athletes I've worked with in the past is about race weight and kind of managing that during training. I do think for a lot of people, trying to take the focus off the scale can be helpful mentally sometimes. But if you are super competitive and making race weight is a big deal for you, then I think it's really important to think about structuring your day so that you're really fueling well, supporting your training, and then maybe getting like the calorie control kind of on the fringes of the day outside of the training or on rest days or whatnot. So that's something that I know has come up sometimes with some of the athletes that I've worked with. So if you guys have specific questions on maintaining race weight or anything like that, definitely ask them. Other things, just as far as everyday diet goes, I think I can't emphasize enough just the importance of lots of different color fruits and vegetables. And I know I told you these were going to be like super generic tips that you've probably heard, but all of the phytochemicals and vitamins and minerals that are in those things are going to be really important for helping your body to recover from hard endurance exercise. So making sure that you include those. And when you think of kind of that balanced plate, it's a really simplistic model, the one that's out there, that's put out by USDA, the My Plate model. But I do think for a lot of people, it's a good way of just initially thinking about how you're going to structure your meals, right? So you've got your produce, your vegetables, and maybe some fruit taking up half of the plate. You've got a good source of protein there on a quarter of the plate, and then your other quarter of the plate being either like starchy vegetables or a grain like rice or things like that. And that would be kind of how I would structure the plate for maybe somebody that is training really lightly, or if it's your rest day. If you are doing a lot of training, then I like to shift the plate a little bit, where you're getting some more from starchy veggies or from grains in there, still having a lot of vegetables on there, adding maybe some fruit to the side, so that you're boosting the carb content a little bit to help support the training. So you can kind of just play around with that plate model and shift it a little bit to fit your own training needs. I know we probably have people that are watching now that are from lots of different sectors of athletics. So there's people that are probably training for their first sprint maybe, and then there's people that might be doing Ironman stuff. And so day-to-day nutrition at its core is going to be about the same. It's just really the proportions and the amounts that tend to change as far as the exact amount of food that you're eating, right? So if you're training for an Ironman, you're going to need to eat more food to support that. When it comes to race-specific nutrition, so that's just a little bit about everyday, but definitely, hop in if you have comments about kind of everyday or specific diets you've heard about. When it comes to like training-specific nutrition, there's a couple things that I like to emphasize. So one would be pre-exercise meals. Generally, you want those to be easily digestible, a good source of carbohydrate, some protein in there. One of the questions that I've gotten a lot is about how long before a tough workout do you eat? So is it 1 hour before? Is it 4 hours before? And really that answer, it depends on you and what your body does best. Generally, we say 1 to 4 hours somewhere beforehand. Obviously, if you're getting up first thing on Saturday morning and you're doing your long run or ride that day, it's not always feasible to have a meal 4 hours beforehand. So the further out that you go, so if you are eating a couple of hours out, generally that gives you a little bit more flexibility as far as the type of food that you're having, as well as the fat and the fiber that's in there, right? Because you have a little bit more time to digest. If you're eating really close to the event, so if you are, or to your training session, then you want to make sure that it's a little bit more easily digestible to really minimize a lot of fat and a lot of fiber in that pre-exercise meal. Because if it's too close, those things are going to affect digestion, and it can cause stomach upset while you're out there. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Generally, for most people, the standards work well before a tough training session or a tough race. So things like bagel or peanut butter and honey sandwich or a bowl of oatmeal. So those are some of the go-tos I find that people tend to like. Again, definitely drop questions. If you are watching, I want to answer any questions. I'll kind of keep going here as far as training specific nutrition. So that was pre-exercise. When you are in your training session or when you're in your race, kind of the things that we have to think about then threefold. So first is fueling, second is hydration, and third will be electrolytes. For fueling, so generally we think of fueling as carbohydrate intake during an event. you need to think about that when you're doing something that's longer than around 75 to 90 minutes. So if you're exercising for under 75 minutes, you don't need to worry about fueling. There is some evidence, I think it's kind of cool. There's some evidence that if you, for exercise between 45 and 75 minutes, if you do a mouth rinse, so like you swig a little Gatorade and then spit it out, that actually helps. It's something with like the sugars hitting the tongue and sending signals to the brain. So I think that's really fun. So that if you are out there and you're doing a shorter event and there is like a fueling station, that even just maybe swigging it and spitting it out might be helpful for performance. It's kind of neat. But yeah, once you hit that 75 to 90-minute mark, if the event's going to be longer than that, then you're going to want to make sure that you are getting some fuel in. The recommendation is usually around 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So if you are out there, doing a 3-hour event or a 4-hour event, you would start fueling around the 30 to 45-minute mark and try to take in those 30 to 60 grams an hour. That can come in a lot of different forms. Some people love gels, some people love sports drinks, some people love shot blocks, some people don't want anything to do with those and they want to use real food like dried fruit or bananas. Any of them, any of those things can work, as long as you feel comfortable with them and they work for your GI system. So definitely experiment with what is out there, as far as the products that are available and the things that make your body feel best while you're exercising. Like I said, if you have questions about specific products or you're curious about something, definitely drop them in there. I'm familiar with most, and I'm happy to answer anything about those. So that's kind of the first part of, within race, or within training, nutrition. Second would be hydration. There used to be a lot of very specific hydration recommendations that came out. And oh, I just got a message from Amy, and no, I don't see any. Oh, now I'm seeing them. Okay, I am so sorry, you guys. The setup on this live is a little different than it is on my own live page. So I am going to go through all of these comments that people posted that were not appearing and scrolling. So sorry. Let me jump in here and answer all of this for you. So I got a question about eating balance, generally still feeling bloated after meals. So a couple of thoughts on that. If you are feeling bloated, it could be a few things. So one, like certain cruciferous vegetables, high fiber beans, things like that. So if that is causing bloating, it may be worthwhile to structure those foods for like other points of the day as opposed to just the pre training session. So that would be one thing to consider, is thinking about those things that you're eating. Could also be an amount type thing. So if you're eating a lot of food all at once before a session, maybe pushing that back a little bit. So if you're only eating an hour before, trying to eat 2 hours or 3 hours before, those would be some of the things that come to my mind as far as bloating goes. If you do have like constant bloating and GI upset, it might be worthwhile to talk to a dietitian one-on-one. There's certain aspects of foods that may cause some irritable bowel issues, and there's stuff like FODMAPs, which are certain types of carbohydrates and components of foods that sometimes when you adjust those, it can help with that. So those would be a couple of quick thoughts. Julie asked, thoughts on running on an empty stomach if you are in the morning. Yeah, so I mean, I would say that if you're doing a tough endurance session, or if you are doing a long one, beneficial to make sure that you have something beforehand. If you're going out for like a couple mile run before, then it's not a huge deal. So if you feel better running on the empty stomach, you're only doing a little bit, a little training session, that's okay. But generally, if you're doing something long, I would recommend having a meal or even just a small snack beforehand. Some people get an upset stomach with a meal. Like you could just do like a couple quick swigs of a sports drink and maybe half of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It doesn't have to be something huge if you feel like you get stomach upset from that. Let's see. A shot. Okay, so with the beets, I know I'm seeing questions here about juice versus powder. So I like the juice shots, but yes, there's beetroot powder as well that you can mix in. It's just like a dried form of the shots. I think the juice shots taste better, which is why I like them. But yes, you can use the powder as well. Protein. What is the best not to feel full, but to have enough fuel? Um, Karen, can you clarify for me if you are still watching? And I'm sorry because I know you asked this a few minutes ago before I realized I had to scroll down. Can you clarify if you mean protein during or protein before? Generally, I would recommend during exercise that you're focusing really on carb intake, the exception being like ultra athletes. But if you are if you're talking about beforehand, the amount's going to vary based on how far out you're eating. And also just personal GI issues. But yeah, I mean, I would say if you can do, 10 to 20 grams of protein a couple hours out from your meal, or a couple hours out from your session, that's usually pretty helpful. Thank you, Kathleen, for mentioning my blog. I appreciate that. Yeah, favorite post-workout snack. That's a good question. I eat a lot of yogurt, so I will a lot of times veer towards Greek yogurt with banana and some granola in it. So Greek yogurt's kind of nice because it's a good source of protein after, and that's always easy for me to kind of throw together quickly. So I think that's something I tend to veer towards a lot. Julie shared the mocha protein coffee. That's one of my favorite just everyday snacks. Abby said, how quickly should I eat after a run? So that's a great question. Recovery meals, it really depends on how long and how intense your workout is. I think people get really wrapped up in recovery. Like, I just ran, I need to have a recovery. I just went to the gym, I did this, I need to make sure I have recovery. Most of the research shows that unless you are doing very long workouts, like, 1.5 to 2 hours plus, or if you're doing a very intense workout that's kind of like 1 to 1.5 hours, or you are doing 2-a-days. 2-a-days is the most important time when you need the recovery afterwards because you need to make sure that you're replenished for the second workout. So I know some of you in here do that, especially if you are doing, half Ironman or Ironman training. Then you're going to want to make sure generally within 30 to 60 minutes of that first workout that you're getting some carbs and some protein in. A lot of times people focus on the protein, that's important, but you need the carbs after as well because that's what gets stored in your muscles as energy. And so you want to make sure you replenish the glycogen, that energy that's stored in your muscles. So I would say if it's long, if it's very intense, or in particular 2-a-days, have something within 30 to 60 minutes of finishing. If it's something shorter, if it's casual, like I go out for a 3 or 4 mile run, you don't need to worry about the recovery afterwards. Your everyday diet supports that just fine. Now, of course, if you're not going to be eating a meal for like another 6 hours, then yeah, have a snack that has some carbs and protein in it, but don't get too wrapped up in it. I see people just getting like freaked out about, all right, I have to do this right before, and then I have to have recovery after, and people they get anxious about it. And in reality, your everyday diet does a pretty good job of supporting recovery. Again, exception being those of you that are doing long course training sessions or that are training really competitively for short course. Julie has best running shoes. This is nutrition, so I'm going to skip that one. But I'm sure people have other tips on running shoes. I run in Asics generally. Do you think there is a difference in your fueling needs when just focusing on your swim versus bike versus run while training, or is it still need-based on timing? And that's a great question. I would say generally it's still need-based on timing, assuming the intensity of the workouts is fairly similar. So, like if I went and did a really slow, comfortable swim, I might not need the same fueling as if I was doing that same swim and then hopping onto the bike afterwards, and it was intense and it was during a race. But yeah, generally the fueling needs are pretty consistent across disciplines. So Karen asked, I'm also curious about the turmeric ginger shots. Ooh, that's a great question. So there's a lot of things like that coming onto the market these days. Things like turmeric, things like ginger. There's some evidence out there that they may have potential anti-inflammatory effects. Whether or not that is definitely the case, I think is still to be seen. But is it worth trying and seeing if you enjoy it? Sure. Yeah, I think that if you feel like it helps, then by all means. I do think there's some research out there on those individual components and the potential effect for that. But I don't know that there is anything specific as far as endurance performance or as far as proven health benefits. Okay, protein pre-race. So yeah, going back to that question about like how much protein do you need to feel full, but to not feel like uncomfortable or bloated during training or during a race. Yeah, it's really going to depend on how far out you're eating. But I would say if if you're eating a couple hours out from a race, aim to have probably at least 10 to 20 grams of protein in there. If you're eating a little further out, maybe 3 to 4 hours, you can go up to, I mean, not that there's like a master limit, but maybe 20 to 30 grams of protein. I think it's about experimenting with what works for your body as well. So some people tolerate protein, fat, fiber better than others before exercise. Good questions, you guys. Yeah, sorry I did not know that you had to scroll. That is something I will remember for next time, but I am glad we figured it out and ran through all of those. So now that I know that, keep asking questions because I am scrolling here and now I can see them. So another one here, it's difficult to do an after work workout hungry before it even begins, but want to have dinner after, not before. What foods can I eat before the workout? That's a great question. So I would say something, if you're eating kind of like right before, I'm assuming maybe like within the hour or so before, something that's easily digestible that you feel comfortable with and it's just going to maybe tide you over a little bit. So maybe like a banana with some like a little bit of peanut butter. You don't want to have a ton of peanut butter on there because of the fat. There's some bars out there. I'm trying to think of which ones would be good for beforehand. Yeah, even something maybe like an RX bar and then a piece of fruit to go with it, something along those lines where you're just having like a small snack to tide you over. There's some of those like pre-made smoothies that are on the market. You could have half of one of those and see if that kind of helps tide you over. Does that help a little bit? I know those aren't the greatest ideas, but I'm trying to brainstorm of what else might be good. Hold on, I know I have some snack ideas on my list over here. Let's see. Oh, like little oatmeal packets. So like if you have the chance at work before you go, like little instant oatmeal packets, those are really convenient, I think, to keep on hand. Or like the little cups that you can just kind of like pour boiling water into and mix it up. So something like that might be helpful. If you can do like maybe some pre-made healthy-ish muffins that you can pack and keep on hand. Fruit and string cheese, that would be like another option beforehand. Those are a couple ideas. I hope that that helps. If it didn't, let me know and I'll try to think of some more for you. Oh, what else? What other questions do we have? Those are some good ones. I'm very sorry that I didn't see them all right at the beginning there. I think we covered a lot of good stuff. We didn't touch that much on hydration, so I'll jump back to that while you guys are maybe brainstorming some more questions, and I'll make sure I keep progressively scrolling down here. So when it comes to hydration during training, during events, there used to be a lot of very specific guidelines on that. Now, I think we just generally veered towards trying to drink to thirst when you're out there. I think that generally is for the best balance of preventing dehydration while also preventing hyponatremia, which is like when people overdo fluid. That said, sometimes certain athletes, especially older adults, the thirst mechanism can be blunted a little bit. So if you feel like you don't remember or feel like you need to drink at all while you're exercising, then maybe setting like a timer on your watch or something to go off every so often, just to remind you to check in with yourself and see like, okay, am I thirsty? Do I need to have anything? Take a few sips of that. The other thing that you can do is try to weigh yourself before and after a workout, naked, no clothes, before and after, and see how much weight you're losing. If you're losing between 1 and 2 to 3%, that's fine. If you're losing more than 3% of your body weight, then you probably want to try to pay a little bit more attention to hydration. Good. I see another question here. Protein's been mentioned a bunch. Do you have any pointers on whether to choose whey or vegan? How necessary is casein for endurance athletes with strength training during the week? Great question. So when it comes to protein powders, the science of it says that whey is generally the kind of gold standard as far as amino acid balance goes within that. And the reason for that is that whey protein powder naturally has more leucine than most plant protein powders. Leucine is important for recovery. So in ideal world, I would say whey is generally the one that I would recommend. Now, there's tons of plant-based protein powders on the market. Some of them have added leucine to kind of balance that out. Some of them don't. Some of them are blends of different plants. So you really have to look at what's in them and compare them before you can make like a choice of, oh, this one's definitely better than this one. Because there are some plant-based protein powders that are on the market that are relatively balanced as far as amino acids go. But I would say my personal preference is usually whey, unless somebody is vegan or they have a dairy allergy and then they can't have whey. And then I would say a plant protein complex that blends different types of plant proteins would be my recommendation. How necessary do I think casein is? So if you eat dairy products, you get casein protein on a normal basis. I don't think that people necessarily need to take a casein supplement. There is some evidence out there that having casein, before bedtime, since it's a slow releasing protein, may be helpful. You could get that from eating some cottage cheese or something like that. It doesn't have to be a casein protein supplement. You could try to take a casein protein supplement before bed if you wanted to. I don't think it's necessary for endurance athletes. I hope that answers that question. Yeah, Amy mentioned that she's done a bunch of sweat tests. Yeah, so those sweat tests that I talked about where like you're weighing yourself before and after and seeing how much you've lost over the course of the workout. That can be really helpful to do. The other part of that piece with hydration is going to be electrolytes. For most athletes, the only one that you're really worrying about during exercise is sodium. So making sure that you're either taking in for exercises over an hour, making sure that you're taking in either a sports drink or a food product that has sodium in it. Most sports drinks do. Some sports drinks have extra sodium. So if you get back from your workouts and you've got like that caked on sweat that's just like dried all over, or if you, you know, feel like you're having issues. I know people always go to cramping. Cramping, the research says it's not related to electrolytes for most people. Anecdotally, I know athletes that say when I increase my sodium, I don't get cramping as much, or when I have potassium more in my day, I don't get cramping as much. So anecdotally, if it works for you, that's great. And it's one of the first things that, you know, I recommend people try, is adjusting the electrolytes a little bit. So if you do feel like you're a heavy salt sweater, or if it's a really hot day out, then maybe going for one of those higher sodium sports drinks, that might be beneficial for you, or a higher sodium food product. Just keep in mind, most gels and things like that don't have enough sodium, that if all you're taking is the gel and water, you're probably not getting enough sodium. So if you don't like traditional sports drinks, you can get the electrolyte fizz tabs that go into water, and you can use those as your hydration, and then you can use your gel or your food product or whatever you're having as your fueling. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Different people lose different amounts of sodium in their sweat. So, and different people lose different amounts of sweat per hour. So it's really super individualized as far as what you actually need. I know there are some baseline recommendations as far as what to take in, but most commercial sports drinks products meet those recommendations. What else? This is so fun. You guys are asking so many great questions. Any other questions about any of the... Oh, you're so welcome, Janine. I'm glad you were able to make it. I guess I'll talk a little bit about keto and low carb, because I think that's something that maybe we come across a lot in this. Kathleen, I'll answer your question first. Though, speaking of sports drink, is one better than the other? No, I don't think there's any one that's better. I think that there's different sports drinks that have different benefits depending on your preferences. So some people don't like, Gatorade because it has whatever artificial colors or whatever in it. I love Gatorade. That's my Gatorade or Powerade or my personal drinks of choice. But if that's not something for you, then there's products out there that are formulated with more natural ingredients. I use natural like this because there's not really a definition for that, but I'm sure you guys have seen some of them on the market that are, more targeted towards like not having any artificial colors or flavorings or anything like that. So I think it depends on personal preference. Again, same with the sodium. So there's things like Gatorade has a specific endurance drink that's higher in sodium than their regular sports drink. Whether or not that's right for you depends on how much you sweat, how much sodium you lose in that sweat, and what you're training for. So if you're training for a sprint distance try and you're training recreationally, you don't really have to worry about that. But if you're training for a half Ironman or something, then it might be more beneficial to utilize one of those higher sodium models. So I don't think any one is better than another. I think there's some that taste horrible and I would never personally use them, but that's just like my own preference. I also think there's some on the market that they target towards endurance athletes that I wouldn't recommend because they might have stuff like sugar alcohols or things like that in them that can cause stomach upset. So that's just kind of another thing to think about, is if you're teasing out any GI issues, kind of look at maybe what's in the drinks, what's in the food products that you're having, because sometimes people can be sensitive to certain ingredients. Similarly, some people don't like just the standard like sugar-based products, and I know some people have success with stuff like UCAN, which is like a corn-based starch, so it's absorbed a little bit differently. So if you have GI upset, maybe looking at some of the different products that are on the market. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I don't think any one is better per se. It just really depends on preferences and personal tolerance. Yeah. Okay. If you have more questions, definitely drop them, I'm happy to answer. I figured I'd touch on low carb and keto real quick because I think it's something that comes up in the endurance field a lot. So essentially, you know, a ketogenic diet is something where the diet is very high in fat. It's got a decent amount of protein, and then it's very, very low in carbohydrates. So usually you're looking at, 20 grams of net carbs a day. It's very low. There is a decent amount of research on keto and endurance athletes. I will say most of the research shows that performance either does not change or performance suffers, specifically sprint performance. There is evidence that a ketogenic diet can help with body composition changes, so shifts in, reducing body fat. My personal take on it as a dietitian is that I like recommending diets that are feasible and sustainable and enjoyable for athletes. And I think that for most people, ketogenic or low carb, high fat diet is not the best answer for them. But if you are out there and you are doing that and you feel good on it and you've lost weight and you feel like you're performing better, then by all means, more power to you. I think where it gets tough with a lot of the stories about that we hear in the endurance community is people that maybe weren't paying attention to diet, decided to go keto, lost weight, now they're performing better, but a lot of that performance benefit is attributed to maybe shedding some of the excess body fat, which can also be done on a balanced diet with carbohydrate at a higher amount. So, is it an option? Yes. Do I typically recommend it? No, but if you want to try it, there are definitely resources out there. You need to give yourself a lot of time to adapt though. So don't start doing something like that, 2 months before your A race of the season, because it takes a while for your body to get used to it and to be able to perform well. So again, when you're on that, your performance either generally stays the same or potentially can even suffer a little bit. I have not seen any studies out there indicating that people performed better, with the exception of studies that look at performance as a metric based on body weight, which complicates the whole situation. So I hope that made sense. I just wanted to touch on it because I know that it's a question that comes up in a lot of endurance communities. So yeah. I know we're kind of coming up on 40 minutes here, and part of that's my fault because I was blabbering at the beginning and didn't realize that I had to. But let's see, masters nutrition needs for masters women. Yeah, so and I don't know if you're referring to just kind of on an everyday basis. You can feel free to comment and let me know if there's like a specific area of nutrition needs that you're thinking about. But generally, on an everyday basis, for masters women, the nutrition needs are going to be fairly similar. We do have to think about, as women get older, body changes happen. Body composition can sometimes shift a bit. So one of the things for masters athletes is if you can maintain your muscle mass, that's going to really help as far as maintaining metabolism. Because one of the things that happens is, as people tend to get older, muscle mass drops, hormonal changes happen, which means there's metabolism shifts, and it can be tough for maintaining the weight that you're hoping to maintain and supporting training. So that would be one recommendation, is just trying to keep up with maintaining muscle mass, but otherwise similar nutrition needs as far as the breakdown of macronutrients. So making sure that you are getting a good amount of carbs, a good amount of protein, and then filling in the rest of the calories with those healthy fats. So your things like your nuts and your avocados and whatnot. I know that's really basic, and so if you have anything specific you're curious about for masters women, definitely just let me know and I'll elaborate a little bit more. Michelle asked about a plant-based diet. So Yeah, plant-based diets can definitely work for endurance athletes. I do not personally follow a plant-based diet, but it's certainly an option. I think if you follow a plant-based diet, you just need to make sure that you are, meeting your protein needs, just like a meat-based, or not a meat-based diet, but just like a diet that includes meat. A plant-based diet, there's very healthy versions of both of those, and there's also versions of both of those that can be based on things that aren't super nutritious. So if you're following a plant-based diet, that's great. Make sure that you're getting enough enough protein. That's one thing to consider. The other thing is it depends on the definition of plant-based. So some people use the term plant-based for vegetarian diets. Other people use the term plant-based referring to a vegan diet. If you're following a vegan diet, I do think there's a couple other, nutrients you need to keep in mind. Vitamin D is a big one, even for those of us that eat animal products. Especially up here in the Northeast, most of us are falling short on vitamin D. The only main dietary sources of that are going to be fatty fish, fortified milk, egg yolks. So those are things that even if we eat them, generally people are not getting a ton of vitamin D in their diet. And obviously, if you eliminate those couple of sources on a vegan diet, it's going to be very challenging to meet your needs. So, in those cases, I would recommend taking a vitamin D supplement. Iron would be another concern if it is a fully vegan diet. You can get iron from plant-based sources. The iron in there is just it's not as bioavailable as the iron that's in meat-based products. So if you are doing a plant-based diet, especially if you're a female, making sure that you pay attention to the amount of iron you're getting. You can increase the absorption of iron in plant-based foods when you have them with a source of vitamin C. So like if you're eating, greens, mixing in tomatoes with them or something that has vitamin C to help increase that absorption there. I hope that helped a little bit. Those are generally the things that I think about. B12 would be another, nutrient, again, if it's a fully vegan diet. If it's a vegetarian diet where you're including eggs and dairy products, there's not as many of those concerns because you get more variety from those nutrients in those foods. But yeah, fully vegan diet, I would just make sure that you're getting enough of those nutrients: protein, vitamin D, iron, and B12. Yeah. Good question. Anything else? I'm going to stay for another minute or two and see if other questions roll in. This is kind of nice for me. I have a 5-year-old home. My husband's with him right now, and he has been having an attitude today. So this is kind of a good little break for me to get to come over here and chat sports nutrition and get a little bit of a break from his little whining attacks that he seems to be having today for some reason. Let's see. Well, I don't see any other questions rolling in here. I'm just going to scroll through and make sure I didn't miss anything else here. I think I got everything. All right. I don't see any other questions here, but I am always around. If you guys have questions, I am over at Snacking and Sneakers on Facebook. That's my blog name as well. I share tons of recipes and sports nutrition tips. We also have a lot of free training plans over there. So if any of you guys are looking for training plans, I think we're up to like 22 different training plans, anything from like a basic 5K training plan all the way up to your first Ironman training plan. So tons of free resources over there for y'all. But yeah, if any questions come up, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm always around and happy to help. And you can always shoot me a Facebook message or post a blog comment and ask questions. But yeah, I hope that this was useful for you. Apologies for not knowing I had to scroll at the beginning, but I'm glad I got all the questions answered that were here. I am going to go ahead and end this now, but thank you all for joining me, and I hope you guys have a great night and a great training season that hopefully races will start up again soon and we'll all be having a lot of fun. So, bye guys.